Is it possible to experience warm feelings again when you have lost a loved one with whom you have lived most of your life and learned to live again? 65, an age that felt less like a destination arrived at and more like a quiet, unmarked station on a long journey. Sometimes I felt substantial, rooted in the years lived, the memories collected. Other times, especially in the evenings when the house settled into its nightly sighs, I felt strangely adrift. My late husband Richard had been gone for 8 years now. A sudden, swift illness that had ripped through our 40 years together like a rogue wave, leaving behind a silence that still echoed. Our children, Olivia and William, bless their hearts, were good children, successful adults, architects of their own busy lives in cities far away. Their calls were regular, filled with updates about careers and grandchildren I only saw on screens or during whirlwind holiday visits. They loved me, I knew, but their lives were full, brimming, leaving me rattling around our spacious, quiet suburban home in Willow Creek like a forgotten teaspoon in the back of a drawer. Life here moved with a gentle, predictable rhythm, the steady tick-tock of seasons turning, which I usually found comforting, a predictable harbor after the storms of grief. But lately, a different kind of quiet had settled in my bones, a restlessness, a persistent low hum of dissatisfaction, a feeling that somewhere along the way had gotten lost amidst the roles of wife, mother, caretaker. An ache for something more, something vibrant, something I couldn't quite name, couldn't grasp. That August evening, the heat was a physical presence. A thick, humid blanket smuggled the town, pressing down, making the simple act of drawing breath feel like effort. The air conditioning unit, old and probably needing service, wheezed valiantly but couldn't keep the oppressive warmth at bay. I sat listlessly in the living room, the oscillating fan doing little more than stirring the heavy air, trying to lose myself in the comforting black and white shadows of an old Gregory Peck movie. He always seemed so steady, so capable. Suddenly, the lights flickered, a brief, uncertain stutter. Then again, before surrendering completely, the fan spun down into an abrupt silence. The television screen went back, instantly reflecting my own dimly lit form, plunged into the heavy, humid shadow. My first thought wasn't fear, but a weary resignation. Great, I sighed inwardly. Just perfect. Another small indignity in a season that felt full of them. The silence that descended felt absolute, thicker even than the heat, the background hum of electricity, the refrigerator's drone, the clock's subtle tick, vanished, leaving only the frantic, sawing chorus of the cicadas outside. It was the kind of silence that amplifies your own thoughts, your own solitude. I sat for a moment, letting my eyes adjust, the darkness feeling almost personal. Fumbling in the kitchen drawer beneath the sink, my fingers brushed against the familiar waxy shapes of emergency candles. I found the matches too, thankfully. Lighting a few, placing them in sturdy holders on the coffee table and mantelpiece, their small flames trembled, casting long dancing shadows that transformed familiar furniture into looming, unfamiliar shapes. The cozy living room suddenly felt vast, mysterious. I went to the window, pushing aside the heavy linen curtain. The entire street was submerged in darkness. No comforting porch lights, no squares of illuminated windows, just the occasional sweep of distant headlights on the main road. A neighborhood blackout, not unprecedented during these scorching summer heat waves when the grid strained under the collective demand of 1,000 air conditioners. But still, deeply inconvenient and profoundly isolating. Wrapping a light cotton shawl around my shoulders, despite the suffocating heat, an old habit, a phantom defense against chills, real or imagined. I settled back onto the sofa, resigned to wait it out. The heat seemed to gather itself in the stillness, pressing in. A bead of sweat trickled slowly down my temple, tracing a path like a tiny tear. The candlelight flickered, casting my own shadow large and distorted on the wall behind me. Loneliness, a companion I knew too well since Richard's passing, settled beside me on the cushions, its familiar weight heavier, more insistent in the dark. I thought briefly of calling Olivia, then dismissed the idea. What would I say? The power's out? She'd worry, offer impractical suggestions from afar. It would only amplify the distance. Better to just endure. Then, cutting through the monotonous drone of the cicadas, came a sound that made my heart give a startled leap. A hesitant, almost timid, knocking at my front door. Once, then a pause, then again, softer this time. My breath caught. Who on earth? My neighborhood, usually so quiet after dusk, seemed to have collectively retreated behind locked doors to wait out the heat and darkness. Mail carriers, the occasional delivery driver, perhaps a neighbor borrowing sugar. Those were the usual visitors, not someone knocking tentatively after nightfall during a blackout. Holding a candlestick aloft, its small flame wavering and threatening to extinguish, I moved cautiously, silently towards the door, my bare feet padding softly on the cool wood floor. I leaned in, pressing my eye to the peephole, the brass cool against my skin. Standing on my porch, silhouetted against the deep, velvety twilight, was a man I vaguely recognized from down the street. James? James Theodore? Yes, that was it. He'd moved into the old Henderson place, the yellow one with the unruly rose bushes, maybe 4 or 5 months ago. A quiet man, pleasant enough looking, perhaps late 60s or my own age, kept mostly to himself, brief nods across driveways while fetching the mail, the standard currency of suburban acquaintance. Nothing more. Now, framed in the peephole's distorted lens, he looked uncertain, uncomfortable, vulnerable. Even in the dim, flickering candlelight reflecting from inside, I could see beads of sweat glistening on his forehead, his pale blue shirt clinging damply to his chest. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. He wiped his brow with the back of his hand, looking deeply, profoundly embarrassed. Why was he here? What could he possibly want? A dozen unlikely scenarios flashed through my mind. Taking a breath, telling myself not to be foolish, I slid the deadbolt back, the sound loud in the silence, and opened the door a few inches, the candlestick held defensively before me. James blinked against the sudden flare of candlelight, his eyes taking a moment to adjust. He looked startled, perhaps by my caution, or simply by the unexpected answer. Evelyn? Mrs. Bellwether. His voice was soft, hesitant, almost lost against the insistent thrum of the cicadas. I am so terribly sorry to bother you, especially now. He gestured vaguely at the darkened street, then back at my candlelit hallway. I know it's late, and this heat, but, well, my power's out too, obviously. His attempt at a smile was strained. And my phone, it died hours ago. Didn't realize the battery was so low. He held up the dark, inert rectangle of glass and plastic as evidence. I was wondering, I don't suppose, truly, but would it be an imposition if I could possibly charge it here for just a little while? Assuming your power comes back on reasonably soon, that is. He trailed off, looking utterly mortified at having placed himself in this position of needing to ask a near stranger for help. There was a genuine vulnerability in his discomfort, a quiet plea beneath the polite words that resonated sharply with my own sense of isolation in the sudden, enveloping darkness. My initial caution melted away, replaced by a surprising surge of empathy. The idea of him sitting alone in the dark, cut off, mirrored my own situation too closely. Nonsense, James. I found myself opening the door wider, surprising myself with the warmth that infused my Please, come in. Get out of that heat. It's cooler in here than out there, marginally at least. Though that's not saying much tonight. We're all in the same boat, aren't we? No need for apologies. Visible relief washed over his features, smoothing some of the tension from his brow. Thank you. Truly. That's very kind. He stepped inside hesitantly, bringing with him the scent of the parched outdoors. Hot asphalt, dry grass, dusty leaves. He wiped his feet carefully on the mat, though his shoes seemed perfectly clean. "The man, please, sit down." I gestured towards the armchair opposite the sofa, the one Richard used to favor. He sat tentatively, perching on the edge of the cushion as if unsure of his welcome, still looking like he might apologize again and retreat. "Can I get you something cool to drink? Water? Iced tea? I think I have some left in a thermos from earlier. I hope it's still cold." "Oh, water would be wonderful, thank you. If it's no trouble." He offered another small, grateful smile. The flickering candlelight softened the lines around his eyes and mouth, revealing a face that was fundamentally kind, though edged with a certain wariness, a sadness held deep behind the polite facade. Eyes that seemed to hold stories, perhaps ones not often told. I realized with a start, only registered his presence as the man in the yellow house. Now, forced together by this shared, unexpected darkness, he seemed real, tangible, a fellow traveler navigating the quiet complexities of later life. I fetched the water from the kitchen, the refrigerator blessedly cold inside despite the lack of power. The thermos of iced tea was still cool too. I poured a tall glass of water for him, adding ice from the dispenser, a small luxury in the blackout, and one for myself. Returning to the living room, I found him looking quietly at the collection of photographs arranged on the mantelpiece, his head tilted slyly. Richard and me, impossibly young on our wedding day. Olivia and William as gap-toothed children beaming from a school photo. A more recent one of the whole family, including grandchildren, taken at Olivia's house last Christmas. A tableau of a life lived, milestones marked. "Your family?" he asked quietly as I handed him the glass, his gaze respectful, not intrusive. "Yes," I nodded, the familiar pang of love mixed with distance echoing in my chest. "My late husband, Richard, he passed 8 years ago, and our children, Olivia and William, they're grown now, have families of their own, live out of state. California and Colorado, far away." He nodded slowly, his gaze lingering for a moment on Richard's smiling face in the wedding photo, before returning to mine. "I'm sorry for your loss, Evelyn." He said it simply, directly, without the awkward platitudes people sometimes offered. The simple acknowledgement felt validating. "I lost my wife, Sophia, 4 years ago. Cancer. It was long, hard. Moved here to Willow Creek afterwards, from Chicago. Thought a change of scenery might help, or at least be quieter." His voice trailed off, the unspoken loneliness a palpable presence in the warm, still air between us. "I'm sorry for your loss too, James." The shared words, spoken softly in the candlelit room, created a small, fragile bridge across the space that separated us. "It's hard," I added, finding the courage to name it. The silence afterwards, the empty spaces. He met my eyes then, and the flicker of deep, shared understanding was unmistakable. "The silence is the hardest part," he agreed softly, his voice barely above a whisper, "especially on nights like this, when everything just stops, and there's nothing left but the quiet and the memories." We sat in a comfortable quiet for a while after that, the only sounds the relentless buzz of the cicadas outside, and the occasional soft sigh of the old house settling around us. The heat pressed in, a tangible weight, but the shared presence, the silent acknowledgement of mutual loss, somehow made it more bearable. The sharp edges of my own loneliness softened slightly, pushed back by this unexpected, unassuming companionship. We started talking then, hesitantly at first, about neutral topics, the oppressive heat, the likelihood of the power returning soon, the quirks of living in older houses that groaned and settled in the night. Then, more easily, we drifted towards ourselves, He told me about his career as a high school history teacher in Chicago, his passion for making the past come alive for teenagers more interested in their phones. He spoke with gentle humor about the challenges, the occasional breakthroughs. I spoke about my years volunteering at the local library after my own children were grown, the quiet satisfaction of connecting people with stories, of helping a child discover the magic of reading. We didn't delve deep into the heart of our grief. Not yet. The wounds still felt too tender for direct probing, but we skirted the edge, acknowledging the shared landscape of loss, the quiet adjustments required to navigate life alone after decades of partnership. Listening to him speak, hearing his quiet laughter at a shared memory, I found myself feeling lighter than I had in months. The restlessness that had become my constant companion eased its grip slightly. It was unexpectedly nice, sharing the darkness, both literal and figurative, with someone who seemed to understand the weight of the silence. Outside, the world remained dark, the power stubbornly, frustratingly off. But inside my quiet living room, a tiny, unexpected flicker of warmth had been kindled. Right here, in the humid air and the gentle glow of the candlelight. The hours melted away, marked only by the slow descent of the candles in their holders. The oppressive heat seemed to lessen slightly as the night deepened, or perhaps we simply grew accustomed to it, lost in the ebb and flow of conversation. James and I talked, not with the forced brightness sometimes required in social situations, but with an unhurried ease, sharing stories, small observations, anecdotes from our respective paths. It felt like uncovering layers, revealing glimpses of the lives lived before we became solitary figures in neighboring houses. He had a dry wit, a subtle humor that emerged unexpectedly, catching me off guard and making me laugh, a genuine, uncomplicated laugh that felt rusty from disuse. I realized with a pang how long it had been since I'd shared that kind of easy amusement with someone other than my own distant children during a scheduled phone call. He spoke more about Sophia, his late wife, not dwelling on the pain of her illness, but painting vivid little pictures with his words, her almost fanatical passion for bird-watching, dragging him out at dawn with binoculars, her terrible singing voice, which she employed with great enthusiasm nonetheless. He spoke with such tenderness, such quiet reverence, it made my own heart ache with a mixture of empathy and remembered love. In return, emboldened by his openness and the strange intimacy of the darkened room, I found myself sharing memories of Richard I hadn't consciously thought of in years. The way he hummed completely off-key while attempting household repairs, his surprising, almost childlike delight in thunderstorms, his unexpected tenderness with our old grumpy cat, things I hadn't spoken aloud to anyone, not even Olivia or William, perhaps fearing the memories would crumble if exposed to air. It felt surprisingly cathartic, like carefully dusting off precious, fragile photographs stored too long in the dim attic of memory. Sometime deep in the night, long after midnight had passed, a scattered, uneven cheer went up from the houses down the street, followed by another. Lights flickered back on, through the gaps in my curtains, a porch light here, a window square there. Inside my own house, the lamps on the end table suddenly blazed to life. The refrigerator gave a loud, welcome hum. The digital clock, the sudden, artificial brightness felt almost harsh, intrusive, shattering the quiet spell woven by hours of candlelight and shared vulnerability. James blinked, shielding his eyes for a moment, looking almost startled by the abrupt return of the electric world. Well, he stood up slowly, stretching his arms slightly. Looks like civilization is restored. He walked over to the outlet where his phone had been plugged in, waiting patiently. He checked the screen. Fully charged. He smiled. Thank you again, Evelyn, for the electricity, the water, the conversation. The rescue. He chose his words carefully. I really appreciate your kindness tonight, more than I can say. It was my pleasure, James, honestly. I stood up too, feeling a little stiff. I walked him to the front door, the familiar hallway now brightly lit, seeming smaller, less mysterious than it had in the shadows. It was nice, I admitted, meeting his eyes, not being alone in the dark, sharing the weight. He paused on the threshold, turning back to face me. His expression in the clear light was sincere, earnest, perhaps a little shy. I enjoyed it too, Evelyn. Very much. He hesitated for a beat. Maybe once things cool down a bit and life gets back to normal, we could perhaps get a proper coffee sometime without the atmospheric drama, or... He glanced towards my front yard. Perhaps I could finally see that garden you spoke so fondly of. My heart gave a surprising, definite flutter, not the frantic beat of youthful infatuation, but a gentle, hopeful stirring. The invitation hung in the air between us, simple, unassuming, yet holding a distinct spark of possibility. I found myself smiling, a real, unforced smile that reached my eyes. His face broke into a wide, relieved grin, the expression lighting up his kind features. Good. That's good. Good night, Evelyn. Thank you again. Good night, James. Watching him walk down the path, his figure clear now under the restored streetlights, disappearing towards his own house down the street, I felt a residual warmth that had nothing whatsoever to do with the lingering humidity. The restlessness I'd felt earlier hadn't vanished entirely. It rarely does at 65, but it felt transformed now, tinged with a hopeful curiosity. And the next morning dawned clear and mercifully cooler. A fresh breeze rustled the leaves, carrying the scent of damp earth. The heat storm had truly broken, but the evidence of the night's strain and perhaps some accompanying wind gusts was visible up and down the street. Small tree branches, burdened by summer growth and potentially weakened by the intense heat, littered lawns and sidewalks. My own yard, usually tidy thanks to Richard's ingrained habits that I'd somehow maintained, had its share of leafy debris and a few surprisingly large fallen limbs from the old maple tree near the curb. As I was dragging one of the heavier branches, struggling slightly towards the growing pile by the street, I saw James approaching from his house, already dressed in work clothes. He offered a friendly wave, his smile easy in the morning light. "Morning, Evelyn. Looks like the heat took quite a toll on the trees last night." He surveyed my yard, then his own. "Need a hand with that? Looks like quite a cleanup." Before I could formulate a polite, independent refusal. Another ingrained habit. He was beside me, easily taking the heavier end of the awkward branch. "Many hands make light work," he said cheerfully, maneuvering it towards the pile. "Besides, I think I owe you for several hours of electricity and some very welcome conversation last night." We worked together for the next hour or so, clearing branches from my yard, then moving on to his. We raked scattered leaves, gathered twigs, falling back into the easy, natural rhythm of conversation we'd discovered in the darkness. It felt surprisingly comfortable, as if we'd been neighbors, friends even, for much longer than just one shared candlelit evening and a morning of yard work. As we paused for a moment, leaning on our rakes, catching our breath in the pleasant morning air, James looked around the quiet neighborhood, dew sparkling on the grass, then back at me, a thoughtful, almost wondering expression in his kind eyes. "Funny, isn't it?" he mused, his voice quiet. "How something like a simple blackout, a bit of shared inconvenience, a small crisis, can change things. Connect people who might otherwise just keep waving from across the street." I nodded slowly, understanding exactly what he meant, the truth of it settling comfortably within me. "Sometimes it takes the lights going out," I said softly, meeting his gaze, "to really see things clearly, or maybe just to see who's standing right beside you in the dark." He held my gaze for a moment longer, a gentle understanding passing between us like a silent current, a shared acknowledgement of the small, unexpected connection forged in the oppressive heat and the sudden welcome darkness. The cleanup suddenly felt less like a chore and much more like the quiet beginning of something new. James's casual suggestion of coffee didn't remain just a suggestion. He called 2 days later, his voice warm and slightly hesitant over the line, formally proposing a visit to a small cafe downtown. The Morning Grind. He described it as cozy, quiet, and reputed to have the best scones in Willow Creek. I accepted immediately, a surprising flutter of anticipation rising within me. The prospect felt significant, moving from the accidental intimacy of the blackout into the deliberate light of day. I found myself feeling ridiculously nervous and undeniably excited, like a teenager preparing for a first date, a comparison that felt both absurd and touchingly accurate at 65. I spent far too long deciding what to wear, discarding several perfectly acceptable options before settling on a simple floral print sundress I hadn't worn all summer. I even added a touch of coral lipstick, a small act of optimism, a gesture towards something. Catching my reflection in the hallway mirror before leaving, I saw a brightness in my eyes, a softness around my mouth I hadn't seen in years. Hope? Anticipation? It was startling and rather wonderful. James was already there when I arrived, seated at a small table near the window, bathed in the cheerful morning sunlight streaming in. He stood up as I approached, a warm, welcoming smile instantly crinkling the corners of his kind eyes. He looked relaxed and handsome in the daylight, dressed simply in a crisp blue button-down shirt, sleeves casually rolled, and comfortable khaki slacks. Clutched slightly awkwardly in his hand was a single, cheerful yellow daisy, its face turned towards the sun. He offered it to me as I reached the table, a faint blush rising on his cheeks. "For the dedicated gardener," he said softly, his gesture touchingly sincere. "Thank you, James. It's lovely." I felt my own cheeks warm as I accepted the flower, inhaling its faint, sweet scent before tucking it carefully into the neck of my dress. Feeling absurd, we ordered coffee, and on his recommendation, the blueberry scones, which arrived warm and fragrant. Conversation flowed even more easily, more readily than it had during the shared darkness of the blackout. We talked about books we'd recently read, discovering a shared fondness for historical biographies and well-written mystery. We spoke of travel, places we had been fortunate enough to visit with our spouses years ago, and places we still secretly dreamed of seeing someday, admitting to bucket lists we hadn't voiced aloud before. He told me amusing anecdotes about his teaching years, the unexpected wisdom of teenagers, the comical misunderstandings, the quiet satisfaction of seeing a student grasp a difficult historical concept. His face lit up when he spoke of it, his passion for history evident. I, in turn, spoke more about my volunteer work at the local library after retiring from my part-time bookkeeping job, the small joys of recommending the perfect book, the satisfaction of helping someone navigate the sometimes intimidating world of information. We discovered a shared, quiet belief in the power of stories, both historical and fictional. Midway through our second cup of coffee, the easy laughter subsided, and James's expression grew more serious, more contemplative. He set his cup down carefully. "Evelyn," he paused, seeming to gather his thoughts, searching for the right words. His gaze met mine across the small table, earnest and open. "That night, the blackout, sitting there talking with you, it stirred something in me I hadn't expected." He looked down at his hands for a moment. I haven't really let anyone get close. Not really. Not since Sophia passed. It felt easier that way. Safer, I suppose, to keep the world and all its potential complications and pains at arm's length. Building walls seemed like self-preservation after loss. His quiet vulnerability, his willingness to expose that tender spot, touched me deeply. I understood that instinct completely, that protective retreat into oneself when the world suddenly feels unsafe, unreliable. "I've done the same, James," I admitted softly, my own voice barely above a whisper, tracing the smooth rim of my coffee cup with a fingertip. After Richard died, especially in those first few years, I think I pulled up the drawbridge and locked the gate. It seemed simpler, less daunting than facing the world alone, less painful than risking anything, really. He nodded slowly, his gaze holding mine, full of quiet understanding. But it's lonely, isn't it, behind those walls? Terribly lonely, we think. We're protecting ourselves from more hurt, but maybe we're just missing out, missing the chance for simple connection, shared laughter, understanding. His words hung in the air, simple, profound, true. His raw honesty acted like a key, turning a lock deep inside me, unlocking a door to a room I hadn't realized I'd kept shut so tight for so long. Tears pricked the corners of my eyes, hot and surprising. "Yes," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion I hadn't allowed myself to feel, let alone express, in years. "It's incredibly lonely, terribly lonely. And I think I've been missing," she said, "more than I ever admitted, even to myself." He reached across the table then, slowly, tentatively, as if unsure of his right to bridge the small distance. He placed his hand gently over mine where it rested on the tabletop. His touch was warm, firm, steady, a simple human connection that felt startlingly powerful. "Me too, Evelyn," he said softly, his voice gentle, sincerity shining unmistakably in his kind eyes. "Me too. Meeting you, talking with you, it feels like, well," he searched for the right words, a small smile touching his lips. "It feels like maybe the lights are coming back on, in more ways than one." My heart swelled, a warm tide rising in my chest, washing away some of the accumulated dust and cobwebs of loneliness. We sat in silence for a long moment, his hand covering mine, a profound sense of shared understanding, of mutual vulnerability acknowledged, flowing between us. It wasn't overtly romantic, not yet, perhaps not ever in the youthful sense, but it was deeply intimate, a shared acknowledgement of past pain and the tentative, fragile flicker of future hope. Leaving the cafe later, walking out together into the bright, cheerful afternoon sunshine, felt like stepping out of a black and white film into sudden, vibrant color. The world seemed sharper, more vivid. James walked me towards my car, parked a block away, our shoulders brushing occasionally in an easy, companionable way. The comfortable silence returned between us, no longer awkward, but filled now with unspoken potential, a shared awareness of something shifting. At my car door, he hesitated again, that endearing touch of shyness returning. "Would it be all right if I called you sometime soon, Evelyn? Perhaps for another coffee? Or maybe a walk through that park by the river you mentioned?" I smiled, a genuine warm smile that radiated from the inside out. "I'd like that very much, James. Very much indeed." "Good." His relief was palpable, touching. He gave a small, almost formal nod and a wave, then turned and walked away down the sunny street, leaving me with the lingering scent of coffee and scones, the phantom warmth of his hand covering mine, and the fragile, beautiful, almost forgotten weight of hope blossoming unexpectedly in my 65-year-old chest. The summer blackout had definitively ended, but something else, something potentially much brighter, felt like it was just beginning. The weeks that followed the coffee at the morning grind unfolded with a gentle, surprising sweetness, like finding an unexpected patch of late-blooming wildflowers in a familiar field. James called, as promised. We fell into an easy pattern, more coffee dates, slow walks through the neighborhood as the fierce heat of August finally relinquished its grip, giving way to the softer golden light of early September. We discovered more shared loves, a surprising mutual fondness for old jazz standards, Ella Fitzgerald's voice filling the comfortable silences in the car. an appreciation for black and white films, debating Hitchcock versus Wilder, the specific quiet joy of a well-tended garden. He genuinely admired my rambling roses, asking thoughtful questions about their care. I learned from him about the migratory patterns of the cedar waxwings that briefly visited Willow Creek each fall, knowledge gleaned from his late wife Sophia's bird-watching passion. It was remarkably easy. Being with James felt less like navigating the complexities of a new relationship and more like slipping into a comfortable pair of well-worn favorite shoes, familiar and right in a way that belied the short time we'd known each other, yet simultaneously imbued with the quiet excitement of something new and precious. There were no pretenses, no awkward games of guessing intentions, just two people, navigating the often unpredictable terrain of later life, finding unexpected, genuine companionship along the way. We talked more about our children, my Olivia, pragmatic and driven on the West Coast, my William, quieter, more artistic, settled near the mountains in Colorado. James spoke of his son Benjamin, an architect living and working in London, sharing photos and anecdotes with a father's quiet pride. Hinged with the familiar ache, we shared the unique joys and the occasional, inevitable heartaches of parenting grown children. The bittersweet pride in their independence mingled with the pang of knowing their daily lives unfolded largely without us. Finding someone who understood that complex emotional landscape without explanation felt like a profound relief. One bright, breezy Saturday afternoon, I found myself wrestling in my back garden with a stubborn, overgrown climbing hydrangea. It had exploded over the summer, its heavy blooms and tangled vines threatening to pull down a section of the old wooden fence Richard had built years ago. I tugged, I snipped, I muttered under my breath, making little headway against its woody, determined resistance. Suddenly, James appeared at the gap in the back hedge. We'd discovered a convenient, if unofficial, pathway between our yards. He leaned on the fence post, watching me for a moment with an amused twinkle in his eye, carrying a pair of serious-looking pruning shears. "Looks like you've met your match there, Evelyn," he chuckled, pushing himself off the post and stepping into my yard. "This old beast looks like it requires strategy. Maybe even a flanking maneuver." I laughed, grateful for the interruption in the offer. "Please, be my guest. It's winning." We spent the next couple of hours tackling the unruly plant together, working side by side, developing an unspoken rhythm, a comfortable team. He showed me how to make strategic cuts near the base, how to identify the old wood to remove, how to gently encourage new growth in a direction that wouldn't compromise the fence. The shared physical effort, the easy collaboration, forging another small, tangible link between us. It felt good, productive, companionable. Later, exhausted but satisfied, we sat together on my slightly weathered porch swing, sipping tall glasses of iced lemonade, watching the long afternoon shadows stretch across the freshly cut lawn. The scent of cut greenery hung in the air. James grew quiet, his gaze thoughtful, fixed on the distant line of trees bordering the park. "You know," Evelyn, turning to look at me, his blue eyes holding a warmth and seriousness that made my heart beat a little faster. "I spent a long time after Sophia died, a very long time, thinking my life was essentially over. Not in a morbid way, just that the main story had been told, the important chapters written. I was just waiting for the epilogue, filling the days." I nodded slowly, understanding the sentiment with painful clarity. It resonated deep within my own experience. "I know that feeling, James. Exactly. Like you're just tidying up the scenery after the main actors have left the stage. But being with you, these past few weeks," he reached out then, his movements unhurried, deliberate, taking my hand where it rested on the swing between us, his fingers laced gently with mine. "It feels like maybe, just maybe, there's a new chapter starting after all. An unexpected one, unplanned, certainly not one I ever anticipated. But," He paused, searching my face. It feels hopeful. His thumb traced small, absent-minded circles on the back of my hand, sending a surprising, warm shiver right through me. My breath caught in my throat. Hopeful. Yes, that was precisely the word. A word I hadn't dared to associate with my own future for a very, very long time. Oh, James, I feel the same way. My voice was barely a whisper. You've brought sunshine back into my world, into my life, in a way I never, ever expected. I thought those doors were closed for good. He squeezed my hand gently, his smile tender, reaching deep into his eyes. We sat in silence then, a profound, comfortable silence, holding hands, watching the sun dip lower, painting the clouds in shades of pink and gold. The air was filled with the chirping symphony of evening crickets tuning up, the faint, sweet scent of cooling grass, and the quiet, powerful, almost palpable hum of mutual affection, of shared vulnerability acknowledged, of a future tentatively, hopefully, reimagined. There was no dramatic declaration needed, no sudden, earth-shattering revelation, just a slow, gentle unfolding, a quiet understanding that had blossomed between us as surely and naturally as the late-season roses still blooming bravely in my garden. We were two people who had navigated profound loss, endured the long quiet of loneliness, and found, against all odds, against all expectation, a reason to cautiously, carefully open our hearts again. Later that evening, long after James had gone home with a simple, "See you tomorrow," I stood at my bedroom window, looking out at the familiar moonlit street. The house felt different now, less empty, less oppressively silent. It seemed filled with the lingering warmth of James's presence. Perhaps it never would, but it had fundamentally transformed from a vague, dissatisfied ache into a hopeful, quiet yearning, a gentle excitement for whatever lay ahead on this unexpected path. The darkness of the summer blackout had, indeed, revealed an astonishing, unexpected light. Autumn arrived in Willow Creek not with a sudden gust, but like a slow, beautiful watercolor painting. The fierce greens of summer softened, blushing into hues of gold, crimson, and russet. The air lost its humid bite, turning crisp and carrying the earthy scent of fallen leaves. My life, once measured by the steady, quiet tick of solitary routine, now had a new, vibrant rhythm, often orchestrated around shared moments with Jane. We fell into a comfortable pattern, woven into the changing season. We visited the bustling weekend farmers market, deliberating over pumpkins and crisp apples. We explored nearby antique shops, laughing over quirky finds and discovering a shared appreciation for well-worn wood and faded photographs of strangers. On chilly evenings, we'd sometimes sit in my living room, the lamps casting a warm glow, reading poetry aloud to each other. Frost, Dickinson, sometimes Mary Oliver, our voices filling the space that had once felt so empty. We built a comfortable, cherished companionship, piece by quiet piece. It wasn't seamless, of course. Life rarely is. There were still moments when the past cast long shadows. One rainy afternoon, while sorting through a box of old photo albums I'd unearthed from the back of a closet, I came across a series of pictures of Richard and me on a trip to Italy years ago. We looked so young, so carefree, so full of plans yet to be realized. A wave of grief, sharp and unexpectedly fierce, washed over me, stealing my breath. James, sitting beside me, patiently helping me sort photos from negatives, didn't offer platitudes or try to distract me. He simply placed his arm around my shoulders, a silent, steady, grounding presence. He let me cry quietly for a few moments, acknowledging the enduring power of memory without judgment. His quiet acceptance was more comforting than any words could have been. Later that same week, he shared a similar moment of vulnerability, showing me a small, worn photograph of Sophia, laughing, head thrown back, eyes bright with mischief tucked inside his wallet. He admitted, his voice thick for a moment, that sometimes the waves of missing her still hit him with surprising force, even after 4 years. That shared acknowledgement, that quiet acceptance of enduring grief existing alongside newfound happiness, deepened our understurdy bridge being built between our 2 solitary islands. Your children, mine and his, observed this unfolding connection from their respective distances with what seemed like cautious curiosity, perhaps mingled with relief. Olivia and William, during our weekly phone calls, started asking tentative, careful questions about your friend James. How was he? What had we been up to? I kept my answers simple, undramatic, letting them adjust at their own pace to the idea of someone new in my life. James reported that his son, Benjamin, during a video call from London, had expressed genuine pleasure that his father had found companionship, his relief evident even across the thousands of miles in the pixelated screen. There were no grand family introductions planned yet, no pressure felt on either side, just a quiet letting be, an unspoken understanding that our lives, even now, one bright, cool Saturday in late October, the kind of perfect autumn day that feels like a gift, James arrived at my front door, not empty-handed. He held 2 small burlap-wrapped bundles, their leafy tops peeking out. "This?" I asked, intrigued, wiping dirt from my hands after some early morning weeding. "Peace offerings for the vanquished hydrangea." He grinned, that charming, slightly shy smile I'd grown so fond of, and maybe something for the future. He handed the bundles to me carefully. They were 2 young dogwood saplings, their leaves already tinged with red. We spent the better part of the afternoon planting them in my front yard, near the path, where they would greet visitors in the spring. We dug in the cool, rich earth, amended the soil with compost, worked together with easy coordination, kneeling side by side, patting the soil firmly around the base of the second sapling. It felt deeply symbolique. As we finished, James paused, leaning back on his heels, looking first at the small trees, then at me, his expression warm, earnest, and achingly vulnerable. "Nolan," he began, his voice low and steady, though I could see the slight tremor in his hands as he brushed soil from his knees. "These past few months, since that ridiculous blackout, they've been, well, transformative doesn't seem like a strong enough word." He searched for the right phrase, his gaze holding mine. "I never thought, honestly, truly never imagined, I could feel this way again, so comfortable in my own skin, so hopeful." He chuckled softly, shaking his head slightly as if still surprised by it himself. "So simply happy. You've brought my world back into color, Evelyn. Truly you have." Tears welled in my eyes, blurring the vibrant autumn landscape around us. "Oh, James," I whispered, reaching out instinctively to touch his arm, the rough fabric of his flannel shirt warm beneath my fingers. "You've done exactly the same for me. Completely and utterly. I thought my world was destined to be shades of gray, quiet resignation. You and look forward." He took my hand then, the one resting on his arm, and gently intertwined his fingers with mine. His grip was firm, steady, reassuring, a silent promise in his touch. "I know we're not young anymore, Evelyn." He smiled gently, the lines around his eyes deepening. "No illusions there, but—" He paused, his gaze searching mine intently. "I would very much like to spend whatever seasons we have left, however many or few they may be, together. No pressure, no grand expectations, no trying to recapture youth, just side by side, sharing the sunshine, enjoying the quiet days, and weathering any storms that might come our way. Together." My heart felt full to bursting, overflowing with a quiet, profound joy that brought fresh tears to my eyes. Happy tears, tears of gratitude, tears of unbelievable, unexpected hope. "Yes, James." I squeezed his hand tightly, my voice thick but clear. "Yes, Absolutely yes. Side by side. That sounds perfect. We didn't need rings or witnesses or grand pronouncements. Standing there in my front yard, beside the two newly planted saplings that represented a future we hadn't known we had, hand in hand, bathed in the warm golden light of that perfect autumn afternoon, was commitment enough, a quiet, heartfelt promise made between two souls that had navigated the lonely seas of loss and found an unexpected harbor in each other. Later that evening, long after dusk had settled, we sat together on the porch swing, wrapped snugly in a shared quilt against the cool night air as the first stars pricked the darkening sky. I leaned my head against James's comfortable shoulder, feeling a deep sense of peace, of rightness settle over me. The restlessness that had haunted my quiet life was finally gone, replaced by a quiet certainty, a gentle contentment. Life, even at 65, could hold astonishing, unexpected gifts, profound and beautiful second chances. The summer blackout, the inconvenient darkness, the hesitant knock on the door, had somehow improbably led me here, to this quiet moment, this shared warmth, this gentle, hopeful, unexpected love, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. We had found our way, not back to what we had lost and mourned, but forward, together, planting seeds both literal and figurative for a future we hadn't dared to dream of just a season ago.